Hello, everybody. Welcome to Print Island. My name is Timothy Mitchell. I am the North American host of the island, and I have with me, I'm honored to have with me, Mark Pomerantz, the founder of Sales Wisdom. Mark, cheers, my friend. Welcome to the island.
Cheers,
Glad you could
Timothy.
join us.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
I am delighted to have you. So, one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on the island today is because you wrote a very interesting article. It was in the magazine What They Think, and I thought the article was fantastic. And it's had me thinking about a lot of things. It reminded me a little bit of certain of the qualities, of Moneyball, which I argue wasn't really about baseball at all. It was about how do you find value where other people are overlooking it. People are stuck to certain formulas. The formulas may have made sense at one time, or maybe they never did. But at any rate, they clearly are being challenged by new empirical evidence. And the old timers say, no, 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 that's not how you do it. You got to look at his game face, his intangibles, and some of the guys like Bill James said, no, it's actually on base percentage and the ability to score runs. That's what you score more runs than the other guy, and you end up winning more games, and subsequently you're in the playoffs. What you did, I think, with that article is very similar, is you offered kind of an interesting heuristic of the 70-30 principle. So I'll let you explain it in your words because you wrote it, but it attracted my attention, and I think it's something definitely worth talking about. And people who have interesting ideas belong on Print Island. So please feel free.
Well, thank you, Timothy. I'm honored to be here and glad to do that. And I'm glad to hear your description of that because the primary intent of writing that article was really to provoke thought. Because change doesn't just fall out of the sky. Somebody has to start to communicate and say, hey, something is different or there's a better way to do something. I think Moneyball is a great analogy. I love that book. I like the movie as well, too. And I'm a huge baseball fan. So it really struck home with me. And I still think about that every once in a while when I'm wondering why did the Braves let Freddie Freeman go, right? So, but figured it out in the end. So I think that's a great analogy, and I like that. So first of all, the 70-30 topic, I can't take any credit for devising or identifying that factor because that is something that's been around amongst virtually all retail and B2B type businesses for a while. And what it really means is that the buyers today and this is really, of course, we're talking about business to business, they do most of their research, their validation, certain level of validation, sort out who's who and who they believe the best solution, the right solution, who might be the best. They do 70% of that before they ever reach out to anyone or accept calls, right? Or accept visits or accept
Sure.
outbound selling activities. So there's a lot of groundwork that's done, and then all of a sudden people show up and they believe they're ready and they just really want you to complete that 30% of the journey for them. And as you said, there's a lot of rules that have been in state for sales for many years, right? For as long as
Right.
it's been done in business to business, industrial selling. And there's always a constant state of modification. I wouldn't say there's always a constant state of change. But in my 40 years or so of being in the print industry, this is probably one of the more significant and most rapid changes that I've observed. And it's definitely caught a lot of companies and thus a lot of individuals by surprise and flat-footed, not really being ready for how do I deal with the 30% of the journey? I'm trained, I'm successful. Everything I've done is built around getting from 0 to 100. And some people are not real comfortable with having to change that process. So this is something I think there are people who recognize this. First of all, I would say more marketing people than salespeople do recognize that because they're directly involved in marketing activities, events, et cetera. And they've seen some things just go totally useless. And some things, of course, primarily around social media become the primaries. And they used to be the icing on the cake. Now it's the cake, right? So to address those issues, marketing people have somewhat adapted, certainly faster than sales organizations, and particularly capital equipment sales teams. And
Okay.
that's what I that's what I focused on. I just kind of identified this general scenario, and then tried to boil it down into how does that impact us? What does that mean for our industry, both the buyer and the seller? What does it mean for us? And how can we navigate this together successfully?
Okay. I'd like to break down the article into two parts because I think each part is equally important. The first one is the 70%. And I actually had a direct example of this that I was engaged in this past week. Uh, I went and did some research on a series of competitors for a particular North American printing company. And I said, I want to find out who all their competitors are. So I went into, I cross searched through a series of AIs and whatnot to identify who would be the good choices. And then I have a list. And then I went through the list to all of their websites. And what I wanted to know is, do you in fact make a product that's competitive to the product that I'm researching, for? And can you tell me about it? Mark, my experience was dismal. Um, what I discovered is the websites told me a lot of things, most of which was not necessary. The necessary information that I was seeking didn't exist. I was flummoxed much of the time, bewildered. In some cases, the website was almost so off-putting that I wrote them off and said, "Well, if you care so little about telling me about your products in a concrete way at this stage of the game, I'm just moving on." Maybe you do have a great product, but for the life of me, I can't figure it out. And I'm a pure product of the internet age. I grew up as the internet reached its inception and maturity. And so when I do research, I'm going to go online first. That's my first choice. So I'm going to go and, use one of many. Effectively, I think most of the large language model searches are just better versions of what used to be, Google, which now is so ad infested. It's has little value at all to me.
Yeah.
So now I'm really doing just solid research to find out who people are, and then I'm going to their site to verify, do they have what I'm looking for, and how is it configured, and can I see a video of it, and do you have an explanation of the products? Does it allow me to confirm something as simple as, do you make something like I'm looking for or not? And I found nothing but disappointment. So in the 70% realm, which you're describing, for the most part, I struck out. Now, there were a couple companies that clearly had things together. They stood out like a giant shining beacon, like the Notre
Yes.
Dame church with lights around it. I went, oh my goodness, somebody actually wants to tell me about their product. They want to give me an idea what it does and doesn't do. They want to give me testimonials, and they want to give me high quality video, and they want to tell me this is what you're looking for, Mr. Mitchell. And in those cases, everyone else just sort of drifted away. I think I verified in a concrete real world example exactly what you're describing at the 70%. Now I have all my core information, and I can move on to the good. Now let's call them, maybe set up a demo, ask them a few additional questions, and work on the next part, which is the 30%, which we can talk about in a second. But man, that 70% is critical. And so many companies are simply ignoring it, and I haven't the foggiest idea why.
Yeah, it's well, good point. I'm not surprised to hear what you had to say. If I had to guess, I probably would have guessed maybe 20 or 25% of the people you were looking at passed, got past
Right.
the hurdles or got through the course, at least the initial part of it. That's not surprising to hear. If you stop and think about it, when you say, I don't understand why, and of course, logically, there's no reason, but it goes back to what you said earlier, being stuck in certain paradigms that were working, I'm sure, for in certain periods of time, but probably don't work as well today. And first of all, I think it's important. I want to say this early because I'll refer to it a lot. I believe that any good strategy is always a recipe. Or I
Okay.
noticed you used the term formula, right? It's same kind of thing, right? It's a mix. And at any given time, what is the most important ingredient in the mix is what really matters to get someone's attention, to attract them, to be a prospect, to win them over as a customer, and then to keep their loyalty. But the ingredients are probably always very similar, right? I mean, in one sense, you'll hear a lot of people say sales is sales, it doesn't matter. Well, half of that is true, but half of it is not based on the timing and the business segment you're in and who the competition is at that given moment. So that's why it's always a recipe, and that's really important. So what we're talking about in the world of the 730, all it really did was change the recipe, where now certain things are much more important and other things might still have to be done, but they're lesser in value. They don't give you as
That's a
much
good, yeah,
return.
I understand. The hierarchy, the weighted value of the scale of the 7 steps has been reordered and reweighed.
Yes, exactly. So, and that's a great lead in as well, Timothy. So, in that 70%, so you've got two sides of the equation, right? You've got the hunter, so to speak, and so that at that time, the hunter is the business that's looking to invest in technology, and they are hunting, just like you said, right? First stop, internet. First stop is Google or certain websites, or now ChatGPT or Grok or whatever it is they're using, and they're compiling all that information. But the funny things that happen, and which in part I'm sure led to some of your disappointment, is most of those websites are set up on a KPI basis, I'll call it, things that drive me
Okay.
crazy. And that's KPI is one of them, right? So
It's a
they,
checklist.
they're assuming, yeah, and they're assuming that you are now in the 30 part of the journey because you went to the website, but
Right.
you're maybe 5% in on the 70, right? You're just starting, right? And you're asking for information, but they're asking you, when do you plan on buying? Within like 1 hour, 1 week, one, 1 year. But
Sure.
you've got all these other questions and things that you have to do and hoops you have to jump over that can make the experience more of a pull or you feel like something's being pushed at you. And you're not ready for that at all right now. So in many cases, that's disappointing. So I think that's
Right.
one part of the 70% that has to change. And the shining stars, as you said, some of them do a good job with it. The other part is, and this is nothing new, but
Well, it's
product
a little bit like
focus.
walking into a restaurant and seeing dirty tables and a dirty kitchen and saying, I'm out of here. Yeah, your food
Yeah,
might be great, but my first impression is not solid. It's not
right.
positive. And based upon what I'm trying to accomplish here, how do you not recognize the value and importance of your website? Not to do a bunch of song and dance.
Yeah,
I'm in a B2B world, okay? So we're not in the entertainment, customer point even. I'm in
yeah,
B2B, so it's all business. What are the facts, fella? Where is your core information? What is it that I'm looking for things? Do you have it available to me? Can I find it? Is it coherent? Have you walked through it like you're a customer looking for the information? And that's what's and when I see that they haven't, they're missing the point, which you're saying is 70% of the decision making happens before they even contact the company to say, I would like to talk to someone.
yes,
70%
exactly.
is done. Well, where would that be done? Well, that would be done online in almost all cases.
Right. And what they're trying to do, if you think of this a little in the abstract, they're trying to envision your solution in their facility. They're trying to create a vision in their mind. Will this work here? Does this fit here? Is this the right fit for us? And if you're focused on specs and feeds and speeds and things like that, that gets a little bit of the information across, but not a lot. What people really want to see is something that looks like them. They want to see an
Sure.
application that looks like theirs. They want to see a building or a facility that was producing something similar to what they're doing.
Understood.
Then the lights start to
Yes.
go off,
Yeah,
right?
give me an
So that's
application example like I would be doing. I
mhm,
want to, this is crazy one. I want to print to basketballs, right? If
yeah,
I see somebody printing to a basketball, I go, that's what I'm looking for here. I didn't know
yes,
how to do it exactly, but I wanted to know if somebody could print to basketballs. And again, a well-designed website is anticipating somebody searching for applications, like
Yes.
has literally typed in, I would like to print basketballs, or, you know, and is
Yeah.
searching in a way that is going, and then here's a testimonial of somebody printing two volleyballs. And you think, okay, that will probably work for me. Um,
Yeah, there's so many ways that companies can approach that, and you have enter the information customly, like you just said, or a pull down. Well, the pull downs are just their categories, and they're trying to fit you into their
okay,
categories so that they can select what kind of prospect you are. How are you, a hot lead, a warm lead, a cold lead, or not prospect at all? They're trying to create data as opposed to an experience. And so I think the
sure,
ones that allow you to get through that 70% successfully are the companies that their website and all of their marketing activities. Social media is a big part of it, obviously. So how you see them in their world from your perspective is that's why it's 70%. It's the majority of what they're looking for. They need to understand, are we a fit together? Is what you do work for me? And can I see that? Can I experience it? Oh, and by the way, to use your restaurant example, I didn't have the person at the desk when you first check in, bark at me, right? They were very welcoming. And so the website needs to be the same way. If that
sure.
thing is barking at you for information before you're getting anything,
Right.
it's the
Yeah,
dirty
we'd like to
table
help you, but
scenario
you
like
have
you
to fill
said.
out this form first. We have an
Yeah, all right.
officious form before you can get any information. And that one, we're gone, out of here, delete,
Yeah,
moving on.
and you
Not
might think you'll
interested.
circle back to it again, but you probably
Nope.
never will
I'm not
because you're going
filling
to
out the
find one
form
or
to
two.
get the information. Not doing it.
Right.
Not, you've already
Exactly.
irritated me. It's almost a deal breaker. So let's move to the 30%, because that was the
Sure.
meat of your article, really. And that
Yeah.
is, okay, your website, for whatever reason, was reassuring. The customer believes you might have a solution for them. They've now contacted you.
Right.
What you wrote in the article, the way I'm going to kind of put it in my language or how I understood it, was you have somebody who has to make a decision. That person making a decision does not want to make the wrong decision. They want to go with the right choice here, so that however this works out, in our case, we're in the digital printing business. One of the biggest criteria is, does it do the task, and is it going to run reliably? How much downtime will there be where I could potentially have made a bad decision in which people are now unhappy with me? Potentially my job and reputation are on the line because I spent $1 million on a capital purchase and chose the wrong partner. For either it doesn't do what we want it to do, or it's not working so much of the time with no hope to get it working, or a very expensive service contract that now you've made a poor decision, and then the company that you're responsible to the shareholders or to whatever level above you to make a correct decision. And I think that choice above all things is what you were saying is the one that's going to drive the final decision. Is, after I buy this printer, what happens and what is the exact steps, so that if something isn't working, it is working as quickly as possible. And then you wrote a series of very, I think, three or four very elegant solutions that different companies have come up with to ensure the customer that you will not have any downtime, or you will have the minimal amount of downtime that any of this equipment can be expected to have. I'll let you did I get it about right?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'll just fill in some of you definitely captured all of the headings. So let me fill in some of the text underneath that. And I premised this article because, as I said earlier, the formulas for success of sales of B2B sales capital equipment, the ingredients are, always similar, but the
Sure.
priorities change. Look at the time that we're in right now. It's with things like tariffs and interest rates carrying a lot of unknowns, and then just the general fluctuations of that are happening in the print industry, with all the different people, crossing lines on types of businesses that they work and convergence, right, as the term goes. It makes for a lot of uncertainty. And so that investment is always important. You never want to fail on it. But right now, you just can't afford that at all because, first of all, the investment numbers typically are a lot bigger now than they were 5 or 10 years ago because they take out more labor or they do more work. They're all fat, machines are faster, and the technology has improved. And it's at the point where, in any given category, most of the company's technologies are viable. And the technology itself is not what's going to fail. What is going to fail or fall short or cause for a miss on the investment is the expectations were not set properly, or as you were referring to, the support, the installation, the support, everything that has to make it work and keep it working and keep the customer happy was either ill-defined or not defined or not reported on or not explained, and there's usually a mess there. In most cases, people can recover from that, right? The vendor can recover, the buyer can recover, but if you're a small or mid-sized company and you're an owner of the company, you can't afford 6 or 8 or 9 months to make this investment work for you. That thing needs to be working right away, right? As
Right.
quickly as possible. So failure can just be that technology doesn't fail, but it just failed to get me where I needed to go. And if you think about it, if you have 1 year of unproductivity, things can change in a year. They change so fast now, right? New technology come out, going to be a change in the landscape with your customers. When you make that investment, you need to make a quick return on it in whatever your objectives were. And typically it's productivity and labor, productivity gains, labor savings in today's
Correct.
market. So I focused it primarily around that. And that the environment today to buy equipment, whether it's 100,000 or 1 million, it's all about minimizing risk. Companies can get the money.
Sure.
They can get the financing, they have the financing, but nobody is flush with it. We're not in that type of market. So that expense needs to be well justified, well defined in advance. And ultimately, what you were talking about, Timothy, I'd like to say what they want to know is, what aren't you telling me? Right? What are
Yes.
you not
Right.
telling me that
Right. What am I
everybody
going to
else
find out
knows? Yes, what am I going
nine
to
months
find
into
out?
this that in
Exactly.
fact the nearest service guy is 2 states away and he's very busy and he can't get there for 10 days?
Yeah.
Okay, well, that
Or
wasn't clear. You said you had a service guy and there's one committed to me. What you didn't tell me is that I have a much longer service arc. I can't be
yeah,
down for 10 days. I've just received the biggest order from one of my biggest new clients. The purchase of this printer was based upon that being a new client and him being happy. And now I've lost potentially that client. I can't afford this. You listed a few really interesting solutions, one of which is a high focus on preventative maintenance.
yes,
What are things that a company can do in advance, knowing full well that if you did those things on a tight schedule, it would eliminate, let's say, 80% of all things that fail on the printer. Another one was, which I really like, which is in some cases training the customer to have their people be the technical first line of defense, that most of the operations and repairs and maintenance they can do in-house, and then the company would then only have to be there as like a last resort, if at all. That they have an operator and service technician all bundled into one, because now you're not reliant on the manufacturer. You're autonomous. You have
right,
autarky. You're self-sustaining. We have somebody who can fix it. All I need to do is have the parts, and many of the parts, that could be another one where you go, look, we know that 90% of the parts that we're likely to use in the repairs are here. You can have a whole shelf of them and we'll even include them in our inventory, but they're at your location. So if you need one, you just have a guy there who can fix it. They take it off, take care of it. We'll want to train you and everything. That's a business model, and I think a smart one.
yeah. Agreed. It's more important. It's always been around, but it's never been fully implemented, I think, in ways that are necessary today.
Sure.
So for example, I think a company needs to first have like a strategy that they want to do that. We want to create a business culture with our customers that we're collaborating with them and that they have a lot of responsibility in this success, but it's our responsibility as the seller to make sure that they're able to do that, right? So there's two kind of schools of thought on how products are supported out there. One, I have a good friend, and I quoted in the article, and he calls it the reliance model. I thought that was the perfect way
Yeah,
to describe
that
it.
was a good
You,
phrase.
ha- yeah, you have to rely 100% on the vendor to fix virtually everything. And to some people, that sounds great. A lot of people, how many texts do you have here? How fast can they get there? What's your turnaround time? What do you guarantee? But the other one is let's say, the collaborative model, I'd like to say, right? And it's not the reliance model. And I would like to say, particularly to an owner of a company, that listen, you want your first responders to be on your payroll, not mine, right? Because if they're on your payroll, they're going to do exactly what you need them to do and when, right? If you're reliant on the OEM, they could have someone, they could want to come and fix you, they could know what you need. But even though you're in Cincinnati and we have a tech in Cincinnati, two techs in Cincinnati right now, they're in Cleveland and they're in Pittsburgh. So sorry, they can't make it, right? And yeah, we had two. You said we had two techs there. Well, but we're supporting a lot of people, and so if the customer is not trained to do the first line work themselves, then they face that situation you described, right? Their
Right.
biggest customer, why
They're
they bought the
helpless.
equipment. Now they're down and there's no
Right.
relief in
They're
sight.
down.
And
They're helpless. People are asking questions. People from higher above are saying, how come these products aren't getting out the door? And the person that made the decision has now exposed themselves to a tremendous amount of risk, both for the company's success and viability and for his own career. And I feel bad for him. And I think, as you said, minimizing risk is one of the key metrics in the final 30% in the decision making. And I'll add one last thing at the end. I think a lot of this stems from the need to be creative on the post sales service side because of a strain on available labor or for service technicians, but also the fact that there's a growing industry and you can only have so many people in so many places and have a viable business model. So whoever is creative with a smaller, high trained team of service people by using video training and maintenance, preventative maintenance routines, training the customer, and any other number of things that allow some of that weight to move into other places by using either technology or creative relationships with the buyer is going to win. I think the people that master service are the ones that eliminate that risk, and then the buyer says, we're going to go with this company. Because what they showed me in the discussion of what happens after the sale and how they thought all these things through really carefully was impressive. And that's preventing us from being down in critical moments and potentially having a problem with our revenue stream. And relation, you know how much time it takes an investment to get a really good customer and then to lose them because of something so ridiculous that your printer isn't working or you don't have redundancy. It's crushing. You spent 2 years courting them, and now it's just evaporated. It's gone.
and
And
that's the risk that I'm talking about, right?
that
And
is
that's
exactly the risk you're talking about.
it's not just the money of the sale, it's the money of your business, right? Because if you're a small to mid-sized business, that could have a significant impact on the entire business itself, right?
Absolutely, no
If
question
that
about it.
investment is not producing for you. The other thing I wanted to expand on what you said, Timothy, because you made some good points there, is that as a OEM organization, of course, most of them, us as me, I can say as formerly, get in our own way or get in their own way. And then you have all these hierarchies and silos of sales and installation, and then
Sure.
the next, customer success, service, break fix, training. But you have all these different people that march through your or that march through your facility after the sale. No one, I call this Comcast theory, right? How back in the cable days, right? How the guy from Comcast would always blame the guy before him. Well, that guy didn't know what he's doing. He didn't set you up right. Now I'll set you up right. And when you have different people coming through with different responsibilities, you can have a lot of that, right? So You have to look at it from the customer backwards. The customer sees it all as one thing. They see the investment, the delivery, the shipment, the installation, the training, the self maintenance training, and then all of that follow up and the customer service. That's one issue to them. It's not 10 issues, right? So they don't want to deal with 10 people and 10 silos and 10 different managers about that. They
Completely.
need definitely a more centralized understanding. Now, a lot of people are trying the customer success route, and in theory, that works, but you really have to hire properly to that. And there's an old saying that sales sells the first machine and service sells all the ones after that. Of course, there's some level of truth in that, but what's really truly changed is the people on the service side or post sales side, they need to be much better at interfacing with customers directly than they used to be in the past. So if you're a service manager, service director, your hiring requirements are different now because of what we've been talking about. So much is on the installation, the training, the self maintenance, and the service. There's so much reliance on who those people are to get the customer into the right position. They have to be able to communicate. They have to be able to sit in meetings with higher level people, not just operators. It really changes a lot of how we've looked at the entire equation of who sells and who does what, and who shows up when, and who owns these problems. Customer sees one owner. And as an OEM, a B2B seller, you better be working in that perspective. Otherwise, that's going to be strike one against you. You have two more strikes, but that's going to be strike one. If you march in there with a lot of different silos, people are not going to like that.
100%. 100%. I almost thought companies need to have almost like an ombudsman that for all your key customers, reach out to your ombudsman. They work within the organization to ensure there's a single point of contact that can organize all the silos effectively and then make sure that's where your point of interaction with the customer is. Not the customer
Yes.
getting bounced around to different places that are doing this kind of number. He's like, oh my goodness, no. Look, folks, uh, this has been scintillating, honestly, Mark. This is a great conversation. I could do it for quite a bit longer on a lot of different tangents because I think it has a lot of meat on the bone. Um, the name of the article, because I wasn't quite clear about the beginning, it was in What They Think this past month, was it? Um, and it's called What About the Other 30%? The Changing Nature of Capital Investment or Capital Purchase. What was one of the two? Investment. I got it right the first time. I
Yeah.
second guess myself.
They added that.
But is
I
it,
my title was what about the other 30%? I was a little more
what about the,
dramatic.
okay, so they made it clear for you. Anyway, it's
Yeah.
a great article. I encourage you all to read it. Obviously, What They Think is a great publication. It's been an industry stalwart for years. Mark Pomerantz from Sales Wisdom. It was a wise article. It was a real pleasure to have you on the show. Hopefully, we'll have you on very soon. Are you going to be at Printing United by any chance?
Yes, I will. As a
Okay,
as a
hopefully we can.
visitor this year for the first time in many, many years, so I'm really going to
Many,
enjoy
many
that.
years. Well, if Printing United is clever, they will pick you up to give a presentation at the show on this particular topic because it's important because it's critical on the front end and how important that is, and then also what you've done really is you've reorganized a SEPA sale and then you've
Yes,
reweighted it
yes,
to place emphasis where I think it belongs in a modern active generate. There have been generational changes. And those generational changes are reflected in the way people use the internet to get information and then the decision making process, which is minimalizing risk of not making a bad decision, especially the risk, the consequences of the risk increase as the price of the item goes up. The
yes.
higher the cost, the more
Yep.
attention it attracts. And nobody wants to make a bad decision in front of their peers. They just don't.
And the generational thing, as you said, Timothy, the experience. People are very focused on what is the experience that I'm having. Is this a good experience or not? They're really thinking about that. And the companies and the sellers that are creating better experiences are having better results.
Agree with that 100%. Thank you very much, Mark, for joining us. Cheers, everyone, for interesting and thoughtful conversations, as always,
Cheers.
on Print Island. Bye.
Thank you.